My name is Eliza. I'm 24 years old now, but this story begins long before I ever knew what love meant. I grew up in a quiet town, tucked away somewhere people often forget to remember. I lived in a small gray building with tall fences and numbers on the doors. They called it a home, but it never felt like one. I was placed in the orphanage when I was 4. I don't remember the moment it happened. Just the smell of old furniture, the cold floor beneath my feet, and the way people stopped using my name like it mattered. They called me Room 3, the quiet one, or worse, the one nobody picked. I used to watch the gate. Every Sunday, new couples came in. Their eyes were wide, hopeful. Some smiled. Some looked nervous. They walked past our rooms, peeked in like they were shopping for something they weren't sure they really wanted. And we all sat straighter. We smiled brighter. We became softer, quieter, prettier. We learned how to pretend we weren't lonely. We learned how to sell the best parts of ourselves. But week after week, they left, and I stayed. By the time I was 12, I stopped looking at the gate. I stopped brushing my hair on Sundays. I told myself I didn't care, but deep down, I still did. One rainy afternoon, while the other kids played board games near the window, I sat alone in the corner of the dining room, drawing on an old napkin. I liked sketching faces, not real ones, just faces that looked like they might have loved me. The door creaked open, but I didn't look up. I didn't need to. It was probably just another couple, or someone dropping off food. But then I heard her voice. "Hi," she said gently, like a whisper meant only for me. "That's a beautiful drawing." I looked up. She was older than the other visitors, maybe in her late 40s. She wore a long brown coat and carried a blue umbrella dripping rain onto the floor. Her eyes were kind, not curious, not judging, just warm. I didn't say anything. She didn't push. She simply pulled out the chair across from me and sat down carefully, like she didn't want to scare the moment away. "I'm Margaret," she said, offering her hand. I hesitated, then shook it. "Eliza." She smiled. For some reason, I didn't want her to go. She didn't ask me what I liked. She didn't ask me what happened to my parents. She didn't talk to me like I was broken. She just asked if I liked tea. That Sunday, she came back. And the next one. And the one after that. Not always with presents. Sometimes she brought biscuits. Sometimes just herself. She'd sit with me, talk about her garden, the books she liked, and her dog named Rupert, who hated the mailman. She never asked me to impress her. And so, slowly, I stopped trying to. I never asked Margaret why she kept coming back. Maybe I was afraid if I asked, she'd stop. Or worse, she'd realize I wasn't worth coming back for. But every Sunday, at exactly 3 o'clock, she'd appear with her blue umbrella and her kind eyes. She always wore something simple, a soft scarf, a cardigan with one button loose, a pair of shoes, a little worn at the heels. Nothing about her was loud. Nothing about her screamed for attention. She was just there, I didn't know people could just stay. One afternoon, she asked if I liked lemon cake. I shrugged and said I didn't know. So the next week, she brought a slice in a paper box tied with string. It was still warm. I tasted it and nodded. Not bad, I said. She smiled like I'd given her the world. After that, I started waiting again, but only for her. I didn't tell the other kids. It felt like a secret between me and the quiet part of the world that still believed in gentleness. Then one day, she didn't come. 3 o'clock came, then 4. I sat on the bench by the window and watched the rain fall against the sidewalk. No umbrella, no scarf, no smile. I felt my throat tighten. My hands turned cold. She wasn't coming back. Of course she wasn't. Why did I think she would? I went to bed early that night, heart heavy and small. I didn't draw. I didn't eat. I didn't speak. At 7 o'clock the next morning, I heard a knock on the office door. Margaret stood there, soaked to the bone, her umbrella broken, holding a box of lemon cake that had fallen apart in the rain. "I'm sorry," she said breathlessly. "The train broke down. I tried to call. I didn't want you to think I forgot." I stood behind the corner wall, just listening. She didn't know I was there. She was talking to the staff, not pretending for me, not performing. And in that moment, something cracked inside me, something small and silent and buried for too long. She didn't forget. She tried. She cared. That was the first night I whispered a prayer, not to God, maybe not to anyone at all, but to the tiny piece of me that still dared to hope. Please don't let her stop coming. Weeks turned to months, and Margaret became more than a visitor. She brought Rupert once, who sniffed everything and barked at the floor like it offended him. The other kids laughed. I didn't. I was too busy watching the way she looked at me, not like a stranger, not like a guest, but like someone who had already chosen me in her heart. One evening, as we sat in the courtyard, she asked, "Do you know what it means to choose someone?" I shook my head. "It means," she said gently, "you see them, all of them, and still say yes." I looked at her. "All of them?" I asked. "Even the sad parts?" "Especially the sad parts." I didn't speak. I just nodded, letting her words settle in the corners of my soul like sunlight through dusty windows. That night, I wrote her name in the corner of my sketchbook, not in big letters, not in color, just a small, quiet Margaret next to the drawing of a girl smiling under an umbrella. One Saturday morning, the director of the home called me into her office. I didn't like her office. It smelled like paper and old coffee. The walls were lined with files, stories of children who came and went, most without goodbye. "Eliza," she said softly, "Margaret has submitted a request." I looked up. "A request? She wants to become your legal guardian." I froze. For a second, I didn't breathe. "She wants to adopt me. She says she's thought about it for a long time. She's ready if you are." I blinked. "But I'm 12. "Yes, I'm not a baby." "No, I'm not easy." She smiled faintly. "She knows." That night, I didn't sleep. I stared at the ceiling and thought about the word mother. I'd never used it before, not in a way that meant something real. To me, it had always been a word other children said when they scraped their knees, or had nightmares, or won school awards. I didn't know what it felt like to say it. I wasn't sure I could. The next day, I sat beside Margaret on our usual bench in the courtyard. She didn't rush. She never did. Finally, I asked why me. She looked at me with such softness it made my throat ache. Because I saw you, she said, and I couldn't unsee you. I blinked fast, trying not to cry. I'm scared, I whispered. I know. What if I'm not enough? She shook her head gently. You don't have to be anything but yourself. That's already more than enough. I wanted to believe her, but I was afraid of being chosen and then abandoned again. Afraid she'd see all the broken parts and decide they were too sharp to love. Afraid she'd change her mind. But Margaret waited. She waited through my silence, through my distance, through my questions and my quiet disappearances, through my storms. She stayed, not because she had to, not because she was paid, not because it made her look good. She stayed because she wanted to. 3 weeks later, the papers were signed. I didn't move in right away. Margaret wanted to make sure I had time. Time to say goodbye to the place that had held me, even if poorly. Time to prepare for something better, something real. She repainted a room just for me. Light blue walls, a small desk, a window that looked out over her garden. There were daffodils in a jar on the sill the day I arrived. I stood in the doorway, unsure. You can change anything, she said, or everything. I nodded, but I didn't want to change a thing. That night, I couldn't sleep. The bed was soft. The sheets smelled like lavender. It felt too good, too clean, too safe. What if I ruined it? What if I couldn't belong? Around midnight, I padded down the hall and stood outside her room. The door was slightly open. She was asleep, a book on her chest, glasses beside her pillow. I didn't wake her. I just stood there for a while, watching. She was real, and she had chosen me. The first month was quiet. Not the kind of quiet that feels empty, but the kind that feels careful. I moved like a guest in Margaret's house. I folded my blanket too neatly. I washed every dish right after I used it. I asked before I touched anything, even the books she left out for me on the coffee table. Sometimes I'd wake up before the sun and sit on the staircase, knees to my chest, listening to the sounds of her kitchen, the kettle whistling, Rupert's paws on the tile, the soft clink of her spoon against a teacup. She never rushed me. She never said, "Feel at home," because she understood something most people didn't. Home isn't something you can feel on command. It has to grow. One morning, I sat at the breakfast table, slowly eating toast. Margaret was reading the paper, sipping her tea. Then she did something unexpected. She reached out slowly and tucked a loose strand of hair behind my ear. It was so small, so ordinary, but it felt like a door quietly opening inside me. One I didn't know I had kept locked for years. I didn't say anything. I just let it stay open. School was harder. I didn't know how to talk about where I came from. The kids in my class had baby photos, family vacations, stories of learning to ride bikes with their dads or baking cookies with their moms. I didn't have those. One boy asked why my mom looked older than the others. "She's not my real mom," I said, without thinking. I regretted it the moment it left my mouth, not because it wasn't true, but because it felt unfair. Unfair to Margaret, unfair to me, unfair to the truth that love doesn't always look like biology. That afternoon, I told her what I'd said. She smiled gently. "Do you want to call me something else?" she asked. I hesitated. "I don't know. I just panicked." "You don't owe me a title," she said. "But you don't have to apologize for protecting yourself, either." I nodded, but I still felt a sting. "I want to call you something that matters," I whispered. She looked at me. "Then wait until it feels real. I'll be here when you're ready." She always said things like that, like time was not her enemy, and neither was I. Months passed. The seasons changed, and slowly something else changed too. One evening, we sat in the living room reading. Margaret was on the sofa. I was on the rug, drawing quietly. Rupert snored softly in the corner, and without thinking, without planning it, I said, "Mom, can you pass me the red pencil?" The word just slipped out, but she didn't flinch. She didn't cry. She didn't say anything at all. She just passed me the pencil and kept reading, as if it was the most normal thing in the world. But I saw the way her hand trembled slightly when she turned the page. And that night, when I went to bed, there was a new toothbrush in the cup beside mine, the cup that had both our names on it now, Margaret and Eliza, in soft black letters. Underneath, someone had written, "Home is not where you come from. It's where you're loved into being." I was 17 when I saw her cry for the first time. It was late, well past midnight. I had come downstairs to get a glass of water. The lights in the kitchen were off, but I heard something, soft breathing, a quiet sob. I froze. Margaret sat at the table, head in her hands, a letter open in front of her. I didn't mean to intrude. I turned to go, but she looked up. Her eyes were tired. Her face, usually so steady, looked fragile. "Eliza," she whispered, like a child calling out in the dark. I walked to her slowly. She reached out for my hand. "I'm sorry," she said. "I didn't want you to see me like this." "What happened?" "It's just," she paused. "Some days I'm afraid you'll wake up and wonder why you're here, why you stayed, why I stayed." I stared at her, stunned. "Why would you say that?" "Because loving someone doesn't mean you stop fearing you're not enough." I knelt beside her chair, and I said the words I had once been so afraid to speak. "You didn't give birth to me, but you gave me everything else." She covered her mouth and cried, and I held her the way she had once held me, like she was the one who needed to be chosen, too. I turned 21 on a spring morning. Margaret made my favorite breakfast, lemon pancakes and black tea with just the right amount of honey. She gave me a gift wrapped in brown paper. Inside was a sketchbook. On the first page, she had written, "To the girl who taught me how to be a mother." I didn't cry. I just held it close to my chest and smiled, because she didn't just choose me once. She chooses me still, every morning, every moment, even in silence, even when it's hard, even when I forget how much that matters. A few months later, I was invited to speak at a local school to talk about resilience and hope. I stood in front of a room full of 12-year-olds, and I told them the truth. That family isn't always who we're born to. That love isn't always loud or grand or wrapped in the perfect box. Sometimes it's a woman with a blue umbrella showing up again and again. Sometimes it's someone who sees you and stays, even when you don't ask them to, even when you think you don't deserve it. After the talk, a small girl walked up to me. She didn't say anything at first. She just stood close, holding the edge of her sleeve. Then she whispered, "I don't have a real mom either." I knelt to meet her eyes. "Maybe not the one who gave you life," I said, "but someone out there is waiting to give you love." She nodded. "Did you find her?" "No," I smiled. "She found me." That night, I sat by the window of our home. Yes, our home, and looked out at the stars. Margaret was in the kitchen, humming softly. Rupert, older now, snored in his corner. The walls were still the same light blue. The toothbrushes still sat side by side. And on the fridge was a photo, the two of us, at my university graduation. I was holding my degree. She was holding my hand. In the caption, written in her careful handwriting, "She wasn't mine by blood, but she